Welcome to the Grace Story Podcast, where we introduce you to interesting people and their inspiring stories. From Grace professors, current students, and distinguished alumni to special guests and speakers on our campus, you can meet new people and hear how they are impacting the world around them. This podcast is recorded and produced at Grace College and Seminary, located on the shores of Winona Lake in the great state of Indiana. Dr. Emiko Kreklau is thankful for God's calling on her life, which includes being a cancer research scientist and, even more importantly, a mother. She received her MS from the University of North Dakota and her Ph.D. from the University of Louisville. She currently serves as Head of R&D Operations at Eli Lilly and Company. And beyond that, lots of other things that she does for Eli Lilly. She's a mother of two, one a Grace grad and one a Grace College current student, and was the recipient this year of the Distinguished Parent Service Award. Emmy, welcome to the podcast.
Well, hi, Drew. It's great to be here.
I was going to read your full title, but I can't pronounce most of the words because you do so much and have had such an impact. But I'm interested in kind of going back to the beginning of your story and even talking a little bit about your parents.
Sure.
And you credit them so much for, your journey. But can you share a little bit about your parents, kind of where they are from and where they met and how they impacted you?
Sure. Well, that's a very interesting story. So my mom was born and raised in Japan. So she met my dad when he was stationed in Japan. So he was in the Army. He was a journalist. So that's where they met, and that's where their story started. So I was not born in Japan. I was born in the States. So he got out of the Army for a few years, and my brother and I were both born in Illinois, Springfield. But then he went back in the Army. So we did get to live in Japan for several years when I was growing up, which was a great experience that definitely shaped my life, planted some seeds in terms of ministry and just perspective of the world. So great experience growing up there. But then we ended up coming to Indiana from Japan, of all places. So that was a little bit of a culture shock.
Slightly different.
Slightly different, yes. But loved, the time that I spent growing up in Pendleton in that area. Just a great community. Actually, sometimes I think of Warsaw as very similar to Pendleton, but with lakes. So I always feel at home in Warsaw.
Yeah.
But so it was me and my brother growing up, and we were not churched growing up, so did not grow up in a Christian household. So came to faith later in my life, actually kind of through my college years when I was at Northwestern. I just had an interest in learning about religion. I'd had a couple of experiences during my childhood that, again, where God planted a seed. And I knew that that there was a relationship out there of faith that I needed to explore and pursue. And that kind of happened during my college years through someone that I met that eventually I married, and his family was very strong in their faith. But my mom, similar to me, had seeds of faith and God's grace planted in her life very early on. So couple years after I got baptized, she ended up getting baptized as well. And so yeah,
it's biblical, right? Seed. I love that idea and picture because the Bible talks about how some plant, some water, God brings forth the harvest, and we have the opportunity in our lives to sometimes be the seed planter, sometimes be the waterer, the encourager.
Exactly.
God will ultimately bring those to faith whom He has called, but we get to be a part of that journey, and you can look back and talk about that and know who was a part of that journey.
Yes.
And then, certainly you mentioned Northwestern, and we read your various degrees. So how did your interest in medicine begin to develop during those college years as well?
That's a great question. Because when I went to Northwestern, I just knew that I was interested in science. And actually, the reason I ended up going to Northwestern back then was that they had a pretty unique program where you could study all of the disciplines of science.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things that intimidated me was having to choose one area of science to major in, biology or chemistry. So when I heard about this cool program that Northwestern had where I wouldn't have to choose which area of science I wanted to study, that was really, the right place for me. And it was really my very first year after my first freshman year at Northwestern, I got a research grant to work with a pediatric oncologist at the Northwestern Medical School. So I spent the summer working with her, and that really kind of solidified for me that I knew I wanted to do something related to cancer. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the research part or the clinical part, but I just became fascinated.
What was it that fascinated you?
I think the complexity of cancer as a disease and the scientific mystery. There was so much unknown about cancer still today. We keep learning more and more, but I think it was the mystery and the complexity of it, and certainly the life-changing impact, of cancer. So it was fairly early on in my college journey that I knew that was the direction that I wanted to pursue.
And so you pursued that then through undergrad. Did you go straight into graduate work after your undergrad?
No, I didn't. I took a few months off, and coming back to that, not knowing whether I wanted to go the clinical route or the research route, I actually took almost a year off and worked at the University of North Dakota Medical School. And did my MCATs and GREs, but I got hooked on a research project at the university there, and it was related to cancer and drug resistance, and I really just wanted to keep going down that path, so I ended up starting graduate school there.
Now, you mentioned your daughter, who graduated from Grace, is taking at least a similar path, right? And also taking some time right now to work in a lab.
Yeah.
And what kind of research is she doing?
Well, interestingly, she's at the IU Cancer Research Center, which is where I did do some gene therapy work when I first came back to Indiana after graduate school and all of that. So I spent
you just keep sending her your papers like, hey, you should read this.
So yeah, she's actually working in the lab of one of my collaborators from when I was at IU, who's still there. So it's just great to, see her. I mean, she enjoyed all of the science programs here at Grace. You guys have an amazing science faculty. I can't say enough about them. So, it's fun to watch her kind of explore what direction she wants to go with kind of that passion for science.
So you went through your master's program, your Ph.D. program, and have been in cancer, research, and now even more broadly speaking, research. But I'm interested to know a little bit about, your journey to Eli Lilly Company, which is, significant here in our state, of course, but also just how your faith informs your research. And then how your faith informs your leadership, because you went from being a researcher to being a leader of researchers. In fact, how many researchers do you currently have working for you or work with you?
My team that I'm responsible for is about 75 people, but we really support all of the research labs at Lilly, which is altogether about 5,000 scientists in Indianapolis, but also in the East and West Coast, and it's a fantastic group of scientists at Lilly. And I came to Lilly from IU, so more of that cancer research background. But I started as a toxicologist working in the oncology portfolio and absolutely loved it. I guess you asked about how my faith has informed that. And it's interesting because as a scientist, I think at least when I was growing up, I would say there was a misperception that science and faith, couldn't work together. But as I kind of grew as a scientist and then eventually became a Christian, for me, they just solidified each other.
Wow.
The more I studied science, the more evident it was to me that there is a creator. The complexity and the beauty of science is, not by chance. And there's clearly a design. So for me, it just helped deepen my faith. But, because of that misperception, I think sometimes as a scientist, it can feel a little maybe intimidating to talk about faith because some people do perceive that the two don't go together. So that was an interesting part of my journey, just getting comfortable with the fact that I'm a scientist and I believe in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and being able to speak, in that context. And that's actually, I think, over the course of my career as a scientist, something that I've tried to be intentional about, not shying away from expressing my faith with my colleagues, and hopefully having the opportunity to minister to some people who are in science along the way.
And I would say, having been able to tour around the Eli Lilly facility with you, you got stopped a lot in the hallway by various folks that just wanted to say hi, and you could just tell there was a warmness toward you because of how you share and show Jesus to your colleagues. How does that? So you kind of talked about faith in science. And I want to talk a little bit about your leadership and how your faith informs your leadership, and then I want to get to a bit of the Grace College connection. But
sure.
So tell us a little bit, like, just your leadership, and again, you mentioned it, but I want to reiterate it, just the significance of your leadership position with the 75 you work with directly and the thousands of research scientists and projects that you work with globally. How does your faith inform your leadership and how you manage, just that level?
Sure. Well, I think in one word for me, it really is servant leadership. It's as Christians, we're called to serve in whatever capacity or arena, we find ourselves and God calls us to. And I think that's how I ended up moving from kind of the direct science into more of a leadership and operational perspective is that inclination towards serving others. And my group, we're operations. So we're kind of the nuts and the bolts of helping the labs work effectively and efficiently. So it is very service oriented. And I find that rewarding. But it's also very diverse. I think operations, we get to wear a lot of hats. We cover a lot of ground. So we're always working on new projects, learning new things. But it's just more opportunities to serve.
Making sure that research labs and scientists have everything they need in order to be successful, and
absolutely.
What a servant's heart to be able to do that and lead others to want and to do that well.
Yes.
So let's get a little bit to the Grace College connection.
Okay.
I remember you sharing some about your daughter, and I'd love to even have you share the story of her visiting Grace and sort of your initial reaction and even how she got here in the first place.
Sure. Well, she was the first of my two kids to go on the college journey. So my goal was really just to expose her to as many of the different possibilities as possible. So we just kind of made a list of different places to visit. We had gone on a lot of different college visits, small schools, big schools, close to home, farther from home. But interestingly, Grace was on the list, and when it came time to come for the visit, I wasn't able to make it. So I said, you guys go ahead without me. I don't want you to miss out on it. So it was the one school that I didn't get to come visit. And so when she came home and said, Mom, I loved it, I'm pretty sure that's exactly where I want to go. I was happy, but I was also disappointed because I didn't get to be here to see everything. So it was a little bit of an unknown when she first started, because I hadn't gotten to, interact with a lot of the people on campus and ask the questions that I have, right, as a parent.
Yeah.
But I was thrilled for her that she really felt like this was the place that God was calling her to. So I was all in, but kind of coming along for that journey of learning about grace. And it was 2020. It was in the middle of COVID. Yeah. So that made it a little bit more challenging too, right? In terms of coming up here and being able to interact. Although I will say that Grace went above and beyond, to really make it a community, and so that students weren't isolated in the middle of that whole situation. But, she had some great classes her first semester. I think it's the ecology class with Dr. Bosch, where she was able to go out into the field and
get her
water
waders on.
Exactly. Yes. So she was telling me stories about, how fun it was to be out in the lakes and streams and out in nature, learning about science, hands-on. But just what a wonderful community. So,
and I remember your, some of the concerns you had, or at least questions you had, or things you wanted for your kids were, certainly faith. Like, what was the place going to be like from a faith? But with your academic pedigree, also, are they going to learn what they need to learn? And I've appreciated how affirmative you've been of, in particularly our science program, and just the excellence of at which they teach and call students to excellence.
Absolutely. Yes. I think, Keiko spoke to the sense of Christian community and faith that she experienced when she came here. And that was first and foremost,
right.
What was most important. But yes, I did have those questions that I didn't get to come here and see, firsthand for that first visit. But yeah, since then, interacting with the science faculty and a lot of the other faculty as well. But in particular, the science faculty, because that is my area of expertise. And I knew that she was kind of heading down that science path as well. So I wanted to make sure that she was really going to get, just an excellent kind of exposure and foundation in the scientific disciplines. And I was so impressed. And I think one of the first times you and I met, I think I really said, you need to market your science department more.
Yes, I remember that. Absolutely. I think you keep saying that to me even now, which is good and a good reminder. You got involved then. You became a part of the parent council. You've helped make some connections with Eli Lilly, even students doing some internships. So tell me a little bit just about your experience and interaction with Grace, and what has that meant for you?
I think initially, because of kind of this not having had a lot of exposure to Grace when Keiko first started here, it made me lean in a little bit more in terms of wanting to learn more about Grace. And when I first heard about the Parent Council, it just seemed like a logical place to start. And I'm so thankful that God sort of, pushed me or even that I had the opportunity to join something like a Parent Council, because I'm sure that a lot of schools probably don't have that.
Sure.
But for me, it was perfect to get connected to the community, get to interact with some of the administrators, yourself, Dr. Caleb, Aaron Crabtree, and a lot of others, and really learn about Grace and your mission and your faculty and programs are just amazing. And really, as I've learned more about Grace, as I've gotten connected, I have just seen more and more opportunities to support the great work that you are doing here, whether it's, through the science department and the science programs, the students and internship opportunities. So really, I feel like I'm part of the Grace family and want to support the amazing programs, mission, and work that you all are doing.
I remember you saying that when you received the Distinguished Parent Award, saying, this was my kids' college, but it became mine, became my family as well. And one of the things I've so appreciated about you is you have a unique ability to both be an extreme encourager, and I walk away from every interaction with you encouraged, while at the same time providing wisdom and guidance and direction. Some thoughts about the future, what we could do, how we could grow and be better. And sometimes that's really hard to do. And I think probably bodes well and shows the kind of leader that you are, that you can push people to be better. And at the same time, they walk away feeling encouraged. And I have always felt that way in all of my interactions with you and admire you, not only as a great parent, but as a great leader and a leader, as you spoke about, who lives out their faith well. One thing I wanted to ask you, because I haven't been able to ask you this off mic, so I'm going to ask you on mic, which is you took a recent missions trip or a trip through Lilly to be able to do some work. How'd the trip go? What did you do and how did the trip go?
Oh, wow. It was a wonderful opportunity. So Lilly has had a program, they call it Connecting Hearts Abroad, which they started about 10 years ago to really provide sort of an opportunity for Lilly employees to kind of see the impact, I guess, of some of the work that we do. I mean, Lilly's a big company, right? Most Lilly employees don't get to interact with patients one-on-one. So the Connecting Hearts Abroad was, how do we serve? How do we make an impact? But also giving Lilly employees an opportunity to kind of see more of that kind of firsthand direct. So over the last 10, 12 years that they've had the program, there's a wide range of different partnerships and collaborations and groups that we interact with through that Connecting Hearts program. I had the opportunity to work with a group in New Mexico, so not outside of the U.S., but it was a new partnership working with the Navajo Nation, which goes across kind of New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, and just learning about the healthcare system, the healthcare needs, and trying to understand how can we support those needs and help make an impact there. So I got to spend a couple weeks out there meeting a lot of people, experiencing the culture, and just learning. And it was just a wonderful opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. And I love that you want to use your time, your energy, and it's all about impacting people for you, whether it's the scientists you work with, whether it is the patients that you work with, or whether it's students at Grace that you get to impact through the Parent Council, that it's about impacting others for Jesus Christ's sake. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Kreklau, Emmy, for being on the podcast as well today. And thank you for everyone for listening to the Grace Story podcast. Thanks to Avery and Rick for their work producing the podcast. We'd love to have you like, comment, subscribe, share this wherever you got it from. And if you have any questions or comments for us, feel free to email us at podcast@grace.edu. And until next time, live your best Grace story today.